Now we have to discuss cross-pollination. So what is self-pollination? There is a major difference between the two. Self-pollination, in this, the transfer of pollen grains takes place from anther to stigma of same flower, that is autogamy, or to the stigma of another flower. That means same plant but flower is different. The same plant contains many flowers, so maybe on the same flower or on the different flower of the same plant, self-pollination takes place. But when we talk about this one, cross-pollination, it is the transfer of pollens from anthers of flowers of one plant to the stigma of another flower of another plant. That means two plants' flowers are taken. Okay, cross-pollination, two plants are there and two different flowers are there, and in that pollination takes place, the transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower of one plant to the stigma of another flower of another plant. That is cross-pollination. So, but it could be of same species. Okay, so the anthers of flowers of one plant to the stigma of flower of another plant of the same species. That means species means there is a species for every flower and for every plant. For example, hibiscus comes under a particular species. Rose comes under a particular species. Rosaceae is the family of rose. So they should be under a particular species for pollination to take place and for the further growth. That means for the further development, they should be of the same species. Otherwise, what will happen if they are not of the same species? What will happen? The pollens will not go inside, they will not germinate, they will not become seed. Okay, everything will be a waste if they are not of same species. Then, so this one is cross pollination. Large flowers with open petals and exposed reproductive structures are called casmogamous flowers. Such flowers require external pollinating agents and therefore they undergo mainly cross pollination. So we discussed cleistogamous flowers previously. What are cleistogamous flowers? Cleistogamous means in which the petals are closed, a bit closed, and there is no space to enter. There is no space for somebody or something to enter it. So that's why they undergo self-pollination. But when we talk about when we talk about casmogamous flowers, in this, petals are wide open, they have space, and insects and wind, they can reach to the petal. That's why these kind of flower are known as casmogamous, where the petals are open and cross-pollination is needed. You understand the difference? In self-pollination, the petals are a bit closed. Their lids are not open, and they prefer self-pollination because their lids are closed. Their lids are closed, and external agent cannot attract them. But in cross-pollination, petals are wide open, so external agents like insects and wind can reach the stigma. That's why here we prefer cross-pollination in casmogamous flowers. So example of casmogamous flowers include oxalis, hibiscus, etc. Okay. Then advantages of cross-pollination. We had a look on the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination. Now we will look towards advantages of cross-pollination. The offsprings are healthier. The seeds produced are abundant and viable. That means seeds which are produced are very capable. They will not die easily, and they will grow further, they will germinate, and they will become into a seed. Then page number 40. New varieties may be produced by cross-pollinating two different varieties of the same species or even two distinct species. So when we cross new varieties, like two different varieties from the same species or different species, we will get new varieties. Many new yields can be produced. Then disadvantages of cross-pollination. The pollination is not always certain because some pollinating agent is always needed. Okay, so cross-pollination always needs an agent of pollinating. Okay, there should be a requirement, there is a requirement of an agent. Agent could be anything, wind, insect or small animals. Could be anything. But an agent is required. And if agent is not present, pollination will not take place. So some chances are there, sometimes agents are not present. wind, wind is not blowing, insects are not present at that particular area, so pollination does not occur at that time. So it's a bit, you know, time taking process. It's not a time taking process, but we can say it's a time taking process. Why? Because sometimes insects and wind, we cannot find agents for the pollination purpose. So that's why that time they are time taking. The pollen has to be produced in large quantity to ensure maximum chances of wastage of pollen. So here we talk about wastage of pollen. In self-pollination, same flower, closed lid, so pollens will not be wasted. But in cross-pollination, when this wind and insect is taking this pollens from one flower to another flower, there are chances of falling off the pollens. The pollens may fall on the ground. So wastage occurs at that time. Many pollens are wasted. So this is one factor which is a disadvantage. Okay. Then the process is uneconomical for the plant because flowers have to be large, colored, scented, and have to produce nectar. Okay. So all these four conditions are required for cross pollination. Which are they? The flowers should be large, and then they should be brightly colored to attract the insects, and then they should have some scent. They should have some smell in their surface, and also they should produce nectar so that they could attract insects. These four conditions are there, so sometimes all these conditions are not met. So that's why this is one disadvantages of cross pollination. The difference between self pollination and cross pollination are summarized in table 5.1. Have a look at this table. Table number 5.1. Self pollination, cross pollination. So self pollination definition. First one is the definition. It is the transfer of pollen grains from the anthers to stigma of same flower, autogamy. And then cross pollination, it is the transfer of pollen grains from anthers of one flower to the stigma of flower of a different plant of same species, allogamy. So this is the definition. Then second one, self pollination, no external agency or agent is required. Agent is not required. Okay, they do self by their own. Cross pollination, every time an agent is required, either wind or insects or small animals, an agent is required. Then male and female parts mature at the same time. In self pollination, they are pollinating by themselves. So the greatest advantage is both the stigma and the anther, the male and the female part, anther and the stigma, they mature at the same time. For germination, for pollination, this is very important, this is very necessary that both the male and female organs grow togetherly and they mature at the same time. So self-pollination is more obvious at that time because male and female parts mature at the same time. But when we talk about cross-pollination, both mature at different time period. Okay. Then it can occur even when flower is closed. Okay. So self-pollination, you all know, a flower is a bit closed. The flaps, the lids of petals are closed. So it can occur even if the flower is closed. There is no requirement of the flower to be open. But it's very opposite to cross pollination because in cross the flower should be open so that the agent, wind, water or insect can come and sit there. Okay, or can attract that portion of stigma. So flower should be open in cross pollination. Then self pollination, it preserves parental characters. Cross pollination, it does not preserve parental characters. Self pollination, you all know, same time maturity is gained. Okay, same flower. So the parental characters are preserved very nicely. Okay, they are not missed anywhere. But in cross pollination, varieties are changing, sometime in different species, sometime in different flower of the same species. So parental characters are missed there. Okay. The new variations are impossible, hence young ones cannot adapt to changed environmental conditions. Offsprings are healthier to adapt environmental conditions. The self-pollination, as we have already told, one flower, in that only everything is taking place. They are doing it self by their own. Okay. So new variations, the new offspring which are produced, they are not adaptable to the environment. But during cross pollination, different varieties are there, different species are there. They will adapt. The new offsprings thus formed will be adapted to the environmental conditions or the surroundings in which they are present. The seventh one, new varieties are not possible. In self-pollination and cross-pollination, new varieties can be produced. That's also goes with the same condition. One thing is very main in this, that self means same species. That's why new variety is not possible here. But cross-pollination, we are using different species, different varieties. That's why new varieties can be produced. Yes. So this was the main differences between self and cross pollination. Do you understand this much? Everyone, can I get a yes if you understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a minute. Yeah. I want answers from everyone. You are in ninth standard, so please try to answer, try to respond quickly. I'm just asking a yes if you understood, nothing else. I'm not asking a difficult question. So in which you have to think and tell the answer. In this you don't have to think also. If you understood, just yes, no, then no. I'll repeat. If no, then I'll repeat the topic. But I hope everyone understood the topic. Then we will move to the next one. Same on page number 40. Nature favors cross pollination. Nature favors cross pollination. So there are many plants which are cross pollinated. Like we already went through the differences. All the open plants in which the flowers are open and they are wide and they produce nectar. So these many varieties of plants, they undergo cross pollination. Now there are some conditions which favor cross pollination. What are they? Unisexuality, dichogamy, self-sterility, ergogamy, and heterostyly. These five conditions apply here during cross-pollination. The first one, if we discuss the first one, unisexuality, let us read that paragraph. The flowers may be either male or female and they may be borne on separate plants. In this way, cross-pollination is the only possibility. Example, palms and papaya. Papaya usually has separate male and female trees, but less frequently there may be also a hermaphrodite tree bearing both kinds of flowers. In cucumber, gourd, etc., the male and female flowers may be borne on the same plant. Now, unisexuality means uni. Uni means same, one. Okay, bi means two, different. So unisexual means the flowers or the male and the female parts are born on the usually during cross pollination these male and female parts should be born on the different ones. That means different plants. For example, palm and papaya, cross pollination is the only possibility because they are at the different plants. The male gametes are in one plant and the female ones are in another one. Basically, in papaya, they are very differently placed. There are two different trees for each of the reproductive organ, male and female. So, in some cases, the both the this thing male and female flowers born on the same plant. So that condition is known as hermaphrodite condition. They are born. They are rising on the same plant, the male and the female reproductive parts. But in some cases, like papaya, there is a whole different tree of female and a male. So unisexuality is one condition which applies here in the process of cross pollination. Then dichogamy. Dichogamy means this maturity time. We already, when we discussed the difference between self and cross pollination, what in self we told that male and female mature at the same time, but in cross pollination they mature at different time periods. So that is what dichogamy is. That means the timings of maturities which are taking place in the male and female parts. But it depends. It depends. Sometimes the male part gets matured first. Sometimes the female gets matured first. It depends on the flower. So in some bisexual flowers, anthers and stigma of same flower mature at different times. That's what we are trying to say. In some plants, anther of a flower mature earlier than the stigma. That condition is known as protandry. Anthers of the flower mature earlier than the stigma. That means anther is the male part. Male part is maturing earlier and the female one is maturing later. That condition is known as protandry. This condition is found in, you can write the examples, you can underline the examples, ladyfinger, sweet pea, sunflower, etc. And in some plants, stigma, that means the female part matures earlier than the anthers, that is known as protogyny. Protogyny. And protos means first and gyne means female. So example is custard apple and people. So custard and apple and people, the female part matures first. But when we talk about sunflower, sweet pea, etc., the male part matures first, then the stigma, the female part. So they have some terms, protandry and protogyny. Just learn these terms. Now the third one is self-sterility. Self-sterility. So we already discussed it earlier that if the pollen is attracting the same plant, maybe same flower, or it is happening in different flowers of the same plant, they should undergo the pollination process very in a very appropriate manner. They should undergo this process in a very appropriate manner. That means they should go inside, they should germinate, they should be able to produce seeds further. But sometimes what happens in some cases, these pollens fail to germinate or they fail to undergo the further growth process. So in such cases, only the pollens from another plant of the same species can effectively complete the process. That means when the pollination is taking place or it is undergoing in the same plant, same flower, sometimes the pollens do not undergo further growth. So in that case, only one thing can help. That is, in such cases, only the pollens from another plant can help, or it can initiate or can continue the process of sterilizing the seeds. Okay, it can continue the process of growth of the seeds. So the examples are ray florets of sunflower and orchids. So this is the case, cell sterility, where sometimes the pollens fail to undergo further development, further growth, and only one option is used there, that is pollens from another plant of the same species, then completes the further growth. Then fourth one, hercogamy. Okay, in some flowers, the pollen of a flower cannot reach the stigma of same flower. For example, a hood covering the stigma acts as a mechanical barrier. Okay, so in some flowers like pansy and iris, these are some flowers, you must have not seen them, but there are some flowers in where the stigma is covered with some hook-like structure. A hood is covering the stigma. So at that time, pollination does not occur. Like self also, cross also, no pollination occurs because the stigma is covered. How can an agent bring that pollen to the stigma if the stigma is covered? And in self also, that particular portion of the stigma is covered. So the pollens will not get inside that stigma. They will not undergo further development. That case is known as hercogamy. Herco means barrier and okay, so hercogamy means a barrier is made there. That means what is the barrier here? That hood which is covering the stigma is acting like a mechanical barrier there and it is not allowing the pollens to go inside. So that case is known as hercogamy. Then heterostyly. Heterostyly means style, means growth, or we can say growth regarding the height and the width. So you all know some flowers, the stigma and anther both have different heights, okay, which will not favor self-pollination. For self-pollination, the anther and the stigma should be of same height or the stigma should be of lower height than the anther. okay, a little lower or of same size, same height. But some flowers have different heights of anther and stigma. That means sometimes the anther is downwards and the stigma may be upwards. How will the pollen reach there? Okay, if wind is not there, if water is not there, external agent is not there, they will not be able to self-pollinate. So that condition is known as heterostyly. Example is primrose and oxalis. Primrose and oxalis. Please underline these examples. They are very important. They can be asked in exam also. Then, so I hope you are following me. You are underlining all these things. Some main sentences and the example mainly. Examples are very important. They are very necessary. But this time you have multiple choice type questions. So So that's why I'm telling you, go through the chapter very clearly. So this chapter is not coming. 2, 3, and 4 chapter are coming. So go through the chapter very carefully, clearly. And if you don't understand any portion, just ping me, just call me, or you can ask me during the classes also. I ask you every time if you have any doubt in this chapter, previous chapter, any doubt, you can ask me at any time. So now, okay, we have discussed the conditions which favor cross-pollination. These five, what we discussed right now, are the conditions which favor cross-pollination. Unisexuality, dichogamy, self-sterility, hergogamy, and heterostyly. These are the five conditions. Please go through these conditions very carefully. They are a bit similar to each other, but they are not similar. Okay, it will look similar, but they are actually not. They have very major difference between them. Please go through the differences, and if you don't understand, just ask me. So the next topic is agents of cross pollination, page number 41. Just a minute. Yes, agents of cross pollination, page number 41. I hope this cross pollination, the advantages, disadvantages, and the conditions are clear to each one of you. So now, yeah, now we will discuss agents of cross pollination. So you all know agents are basically, there are two agents, insects and wind. Insects means small insects, like you all know. Basically, the most, the most common insect which help in pollinating is the honeybee. Obviously the honeybee, because honeybees form their honey and everything, the wax they used to form by pollinating on the different flowers and by secreting nectar. Okay, there are some nectar secreting flowers, so they suck out the nectar from there, and they usually do the pollination. So honeybees are the most common example in insects. Then wind. But some flowers are also pollinated by animals and birds like squirrels, bats, etc., or maybe by water in case of aquatic plants. Okay, there are some aquatic plants which are present on water, so there the carrier or the agent is water. But sometimes, rather than the insect and wind, there are some animals, small animals like birds and bats, which help in pollination. Now, each category has some special features that will maximize the chance of pollination purpose. So, insect pollinated means, so there is the word, there is a different word for insect pollinated, entomophilus. Entomophilus. Why entomophilus? You all know a person who studies insect is known as, that process, that study is known as entomology, or a person who study insect is known as entomologist. So entomo refers to insects. Okay, so this entomophilus means insect affinity. Flowers usually have the following characteristics. Let us read these characteristics. The flowers are large. They are usually bright colored to attract insect. They emit scent. They produce nectar. Pollens are sticky. The stigma is sticky and does not generally hang out from the flower. Flowers tend to be in clusters to make them conspicuous, especially in cases where individual flowers are small. So insect pollinated has 7 characteristics. That means you all know. Insect whenever insect is given there, 4 things should be clear in your mind. The large size, the bright petals, the scent, or we can say the smell of the flower, and the nectar. These 4 things will attract the insect. So these 4 things are very obviously they are must in insect pollination. Then other than that, pollens are sticky so that the insect can carry them on their back and they will not fall down. So the pollens should be sticky. And the stigma is also sticky and does not generally hang out from the flower. That means the stigma has a particular position, it will remain there itself. Then the flowers form some clusters. They will form some masses to make them conspicuous, especially in cases where individual flowers are small. So in some flowers, the individual flowers are very small. Pollination could not take place there. So they will form a cluster. They will look like a big flower, a big mass, and then insect can come and pollinate them. So example is dahlia. So these are the characteristics of insect pollination. I told you insect pollination, 4 characteristics should come in your mind by hearing the name insect. Which are they? Large petals, bright color, scent, and last one is the nectar. Okay, because insects are mainly attracted towards the bright color, the scent, and the nectar. Okay, so these are the characteristics of insect pollination. Now we have wind pollinated. Wind means there is a particular word given here, anemophilous. Anemophilous. Anemo refers to wind. So the flowers have the special features. The flowers are small, they usually not brightly colored and often dull green. They do not produce scent or nectar. Stamens are long and hang out of the flower to be exposed to wind. Example, maize. The anthers are large and loosely attached to the filaments so that the slightest wind may move them. Pollen is produced in very large quantities. Pollen grains are light, dry, and smooth. Stigmas are feathery and hang out of the flower to trap the pollen grain. Now, in wind, in the case of wind, you all know, in the case of insect, the pollens are sticky. The stigma is also sticky. The pollen can stick to the body of the insect, but it's not in the case of wind. The pollens are not sticky. Here, the flowers are small. They are just opposite to the insect. Okay, small flowers, not brightly colored, do not produce scent and nectar. Also, the stamens are long. Why? Because if the stamens are long, then only they can pollinate. Then only the wind can help them to pollinate. Otherwise, if the stamens are, in the affinity of that flower or inside very deep down in that flower, the wind will not reach that pollen. The pollen which is carried by the wind, it will not reach that stigma. And the stigma and the stamen both should be in a height. So both should be in a certain height so that wind can reach them. Then pollen produces in very large quantities. Why? Because in insect pollination, they can stick to the body and more pollen will not be wasted. But here, chances of wasting are more because the carrier is wind, the agent is wind, so they should be produced in very large quantities. Also, pollens are what is the nature of the pollens? Light, dry, and smooth. They are very light, dry, and smooth. They are not sticky, so that they can be easily carried away by wind. Like you all know, when we put some oil or water in a ground, and when we put pollen over it or some powdery substances, and when we blow air from our mouth, it will not move. It will just stick there in that oil or water. Similarly, here also the pollen should be dry so that wind can carry them easily. If it is sticky, if it is stick to the body, the wind will not be able to carry the pollens. Clear? Then the stigmas are feathery and hang out of the flower to trap the pollen grains. So basically in aquatic plants, more often stigmas, they are very feathery. They hang out of the body and trap the pollen grain. Is it clear to you all this much?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay, we have 5 minutes more. We will just discuss water pollinated also. Then we will stop. So the last one. So basically there are three: insect pollinated, wind pollinated, and water one. So insect wind we discussed. Now we have to discuss water pollinated or hydrophilous. Hydro refers to water. So they have the following characteristic. Pollen grains are produced in large numbers. Some plants, the pollen grains have specific gravity almost equal to that of water, that they remain floating below the surface. Then in some special cases, male flowers are such that they float on the surface of water till they meet female flowers. Example, Melisneria. So water pollinated have very less characteristic as compared to the other two. So the most characteristics are present in wind pollinated and the insect ones. Water one, if we talk about water pollination, again the pollens should be large in number because the carrier is water. You all know water flow is very, the gravity, the flow of water is very high. So the pollen should be produced in more quantity. Then the pollens have specific gravity which is almost equal to the water. Okay, that means the pollen remains floating in the water, surface of the water. Clear? Then in some special cases, male flowers float on the surface of water till they meet female flowers. You can see this diagram, this picture, this figure 5.3. The male flowers are floating on the surface of the water. And the female flowers, the stigma is on the surface of water, and they are trying to meet the stigma. They are trying to attach to the stigma. So till they get attached to the stigma, they remain floating on the surface. This is in case of some plants, like example Velisneria. Some plants are pollinated by birds, which is known as ornithophily. Example Bignonia and Canna. There are some birds which travel from flower to flower. So that process, that pollination is known as ornithophily. Example is Bignonia and Canna. Please write these examples in the exam if asked, or if not asked also, you can write. Okay, examples are important everywhere. So you can write even if it is not asked, please write the example. So okay, water pollinated is also done. Insect, wind, and water pollinated. These are the agents of cross pollination. So there is a difference between wind and insect pollinated flowers on page number 42. You can just go through that difference, that box. You can just go through that. Wind and insect. What is the difference? Because we have seen usually most of the things are not common between wind and insect. Wind is just opposite to the insect one. So there are the differences given. If you go through the differences, everything will be more clear to you. So, okay, we will do the next topic in the next class. We will complete up to this much we have completed. Do you have any doubt regarding these topics, what we discussed today? Anyone? If you don't have a doubt, then we will stop here. Just check if you have any doubt, you can ask me. Otherwise, we are stopping. We will stop. We will do the next portion in the coming class. Clear? Is everything clear to you all? Can I get an
Yes,
answer?
ma'am.
Yes, yes. Only one person is answering. I expect everyone. I expect to everyone that everyone answers. Okay, you all are here to study.
Yes,
You all
ma'am.
are in 9th standard. You are not small children. Please try to respond. Okay, so we will meet in the next class. We are stopping
Okay,
here.
ma'am.
Okay.